Most of us use social media to share updates or stay in touch with loved ones. But for some people, it is quite literally a lifeline. Migrants often use social media to not only communicate with loved ones abroad, but also to document their journeys and gain vital information for their safety. So how is social media impacting migrant journeys? I'm Myriam Francois, and this is The Stream.
The largest deportation effort.
A lot of people die on this journey.
Come on. New York.
Muslims, illegal immigration, none.
Take control of our borders.
Refugees have been known to use Facebook to call for help if they get stranded at sea and even to ask which tents to purchase for their journey. But criminal gangs also use social media to advertise dangerous crossings and lure potential victims. In this episode, we'll be discovering the role that social media plays in the choices being made by those risking it all for a better future. Here to discuss this with me are Zoe Gardner, an independent migration policy researcher, advocate and writer, joining us from London. From Oxford, Femi Nylander, poet, actor, filmmaker and author of the book Seeking Refuge 2060. And Carlos Eduardo Espina, an immigrant rights activist and law student who provides legal advice on migration to his 8.4 million followers on TikTok. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Welcome to you all. Thank you for being here. Zoe, I'll start by asking you, you research migration. Today, migrants produce a huge digital footprint documenting their routes and its pitfalls. What kind of changes has social media brought to the experience of undocumented migrants?
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, I think that at the moment, what we see when we're working with migrants, especially when they've just arrived, the most important thing that they ask for, the first thing they ever ask for is a charger for their phones, for their smartphones, because that has become the way in which they receive all their information, keep in touch with their families and loved ones back home. And it's become a huge part of how they're able to make the journeys that they make. So I think that the key thing is just access to information. There's a huge amount of information that is shared across social media by migrants and by other actors in interacting with migrants, be that, as you say, smugglers and facilitators and fixers, or also governments who are seeking to influence the movement of people across borders as well. So it's a huge space for information. Some of that is positive. It helps people to avoid danger. And unfortunately, because it's a totally unregulated space, it's also a place where there's a huge amount of misinformation being shared.
Right.
And that can be both by smugglers, but also governments who are sharing information that is designed to prevent people from making journeys safely to reach destination countries.
And we will definitely be coming back to that. Carlos, you provide legal advice, mainly in Spanish, to your millions of followers on social media. Tell us about what kind of content does best with your followers and also what motivates you to create it.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. So I create content in Spanish for my audience. A lot of them are immigrants or people who plan on immigrating to the United States. And mostly what I provide is not so much legal advice, just information in general that's out there, but maybe people don't know how to find it or they have trouble breaking it down. So for example, if the United States government launches a new policy or changes certain regulations, there's always a lot of misinformation around it, a lot of confusion. So I get these very complicated topics and I break them down and make them easy to understand and in a language that people, are able to comprehend, because it's not very helpful if the government's putting out things in English and most migrants don't understand English. So I just try to break down that barrier, go to trusted sources, find that information, and then I'm able to pick out, this is what people should know, and then I put it out there. So whatever it is that people are doing, at least that they're informed and they know of what's really going on. And like was mentioned previously, they don't fall into the trap of believing in misinformation or lies or, these deceiving things that are being put out there on social media.
And you were telling us also maybe what motivates you in this work that you do?
Yeah, well, I just believe, I believe in truth. I believe that immigration is a human right, and that, if people are going to make this decision, well, they should be aware of the possible consequences, the risks associated. And, I also do a lot of content about alternative pathways. So, I try to encourage people who are maybe thinking of taking illegal routes of immigration, of being aware that there is a lot of legal pathways as well to immigrate to the United States. That's mostly what I focus on because I'm here in the United States, but I know there's also a lot of legal pathways in other countries. And, people should be made aware of those because sometimes they want to immigrate legally. They just don't know how to or don't understand the process. So I try to help break that down as well.
Thank you so much. Well, Femi, you have written a book, Seeking Refuge in 2060, which features a Nigerian boy who sets off through the Sahara Desert but does not foresee the odyssey of trials and tribulations which await him. Has social media made it easier or harder for migrants to foresee the challenges ahead, in your view?
Indeed, there's two main characters, and he's one of them. The other one is a video game kid in the UK who gets recruited by the Home Office to stop migrants or refugees getting in. But yeah, I mean, so in the book, one of the smugglers in the book says to Hakeem, "Take the journey sea right to Germany. Make your new home in Paris or Rome. Hire a fleet to take you to Greece. As long as you pay, you get to UK." Now, what's that? That's an advert, because we're talking about an economic market here. It's an economic market which some people say is illegal, illicit, but then other people would say that shipping off asylum seekers to Rwanda is illegal and illicit. But at the end of the day, we're talking about a place where products are being advertised. Both smugglers and traffickers, because there is a distinction between the two, are working in this space. And people are wanting information. They're wanting to compare people. They're wanting to compare different service providers, because some of the service providers will have you drowning in the Mediterranean or dying in the Sahara Desert, and other ones will get you to Europe or get you to the places you want to go. And so we're talking about a method. It's a tool at the end of the day. Social media is a tool, and it's a tool which can be used by nefarious actors and which also can be used by actors who have good intentions. I mean, social media, a refugee themselves can share on social media when they're at the port of Izmir or somewhere. Look, here's 2 life jackets and I've bought both, and one of them actually works and the other one is fake. And this is how you tell the difference. So there's plenty of information which can be shared through social media.
Well, in 2021, David Yambio withstood outside the UNHCR headquarters in Tripoli in Libya to protest the treatment of refugees and migrants in the country, a protest which lasted over 3 months. At the time, he was himself fleeing South Sudan. Today, he's a spokesperson at the NGO Refugees in Libya. Let's listen to him.
I am a person with a very horrible experience, starting from my country of origin and having left my country to reach several other countries as a refugee, and then until Libya towards the end of 2018, where I was subjected to unimaginable atrocities, human rights violations, torture, exploitations, and slave labor. We have been afraid of persecution. We started using social media long ago to document and publish what was happening. But until then, we had to remove those masks because we couldn't bear it anymore. We had to tell our stories, unfiltered as it was. We had used social media when we were stuck in the street in front of the UNHCR headquarters in Tripoli. We had nothing. We only used social media. We were able to reach to the European Commission. We were able to reach and speak with Pope Francis. And we were able to reach several European civil societies and the United Nations as a whole. So this was already a perfect example that no matter where we are, we can always use what is available at our disposal. And social media was one of the reasons in which we managed to gain recognition, and it is continuing to this day.
Carlos, David was able to get the attention of the authorities in the EU and even the Pope using social media. Do you feel that it can be a tool that can help, change policy in favor of migrant rights?
Yes, for sure. I mean, I personally know there's a lot of politicians here in the United States or policymakers who follow not just my kind of content, but other people's as well. And I think, like was mentioned previously, while social media has been used, right, to misinform, not only about the journey, but also about immigrants themselves and paint them in a negative light, it is also a platform where people can highlight the positive things. So I make a lot of content, educating not just migrants, but people in general about what immigrants provide to the United States. A lot of times we don't even realize the great contributions we make to this country. I break down a lot of misconceptions. And also I share stories. There's a lot of new migrants who arrive who then make videos about the businesses they've created or the jobs that they're doing, that kind of stuff. And I try to use my platform to uplift those things and kind of break down these stigmas and these fake narratives that, immigrants are all criminals and horrible people when that's really not the case. So I definitely do think that social media can be used to highlight the positives, and that ultimately leads to more humanitarian policies.
Femi, is there a sense that social media can also give a voice to the perspective of migrants? The connection maybe that they themselves make between historical and maybe contemporary forms of inequality in the world and migration flows, which are perhaps less apparent in mainstream discourse?
100%. In the mainstream media, we often see these things put to one side, and unfortunately, especially in the UK, but also in the US, well, especially in both of them, we see this narrative of small boats, of an invasion, of people coming and trying to steal our jobs, people coming and trying to kind of change our culture, and it's really not true. It's something which can be challenged by people sharing their journeys, people sharing their stories through social media, which is a space which, and I mean, we all know the stories about social media being owned by a few billionaires and shadow banning and the rest. But at the end of the day, what we've seen with Gaza is that social media is a different space, apart from mainstream media, where a different story can be told. And it's the same with the migrant journey. If someone shares the realities of what they go through as they travel through the Libyan route or the route through Turkey, and their personality comes across, the similarities between them and the people watching in the West or in any other country, you can really start to build that empathy, which is something that is unfortunately not built through mainstream platforms these days, which are very, very quick to scapegoat migrants and refugees, which are very, very quick to try and blame them for a lot of problems. And also social media can address things like the Dublin regulation and some of the stuff which is left out of some of the less peripheral European countries, and actually say, well, look at what Greece and look at what Italy are dealing with, and then look at what the UK is dealing with. It's really not equivalent in any way, shape or form.
Well, while social media has provided migrants with information which can help them, it has also, of course, been a no man's land where traffickers and smugglers also prey on vulnerable people. In one of the WhatsApp groups, they lied about the ways to travel to the US, someone says. The things they said weren't true. They just wanted to swindle us or use us as a means of transporting drugs. They followed that information and they disappeared. There are rumors that they were kidnapped by drug traffickers, but we don't know where they are. Zoe, is this something you've come across? And can you tell us about some of the dangers that migrants also face whilst relying on information on social media?
Yes, obviously there's a lot of bad actors in this space as well who are trying to sell a passage across, even if what they're providing is completely unsafe. And in the worst cases, that can also be a route into being trafficked and being exploited in forced labor on arrival as well. But I think that it's important when you mention that story about those people who disappeared in the desert and the the way they had been tricked by social media. It's important also to highlight that through social media, people are prevented from disappearing. So with the Alarm Phone Network and the Watch the Med Network and various other NGO activities using social media across the Mediterranean region, refugees and asylum seekers are able to send messages about their location, and that can be shared with these groups. And then that's broadcasted and allows those people to be found and rescued, but also for us to monitor in circumstances where, for example, in the Greek case is too often happening, where the Greek authorities are actually engaging in illegal pushback activities. So that's where they actually force people onto life rafts and leave them adrift in the middle of the ocean, effectively disappearing them. So the Alarm Phone Network is one of these really important ways that they're shining a light on that issue and stopping people from being disappeared in that way as well.
Well, in 2022, Manuel Monterosa set out for the United States with a plan to record his journey.
Hemos pasado la montaña que llaman la montaña de la muerte. Ahí nos tocó ayudar a rescatar a un amigo árabe de la comunidad árabe que está por allá atrapado. Ahí quedó ya en el río. Y aquí vamos.
He posted it on YouTube to warn others of the perils they might face. He eventually made it to America, but after his posts went viral, he has now become an influencer, having returned to South America, where he now earns a living from posting about migration routes. Carlos, 70% of migrants say they regularly get information from Facebook, more than any other source other than words of mouth. Do you have any reservations about social media companies like Meta and YouTube making money off these kinds of posts, which ultimately can be seen to encourage people to take dangerous routes?
Yes, I think there's a lot of complexities when it comes to the social media platforms and the regulations around this kind of content. I personally struggled with it a lot of times. You know, I try to put out information that's true, that's verified, and that's reliable. And then you have issues of shadow banning and stuff like that. When then you see other kind of content, you know, that's just completely false or misleading, or even you know, using by smugglers, etc. And that content, it goes viral. So it's very hard to gauge exactly what they are pushing and what they're not pushing. But what is true is that every day more and more people are relying on Facebook and also TikTok more recently to get this kind of information. And it has become a sort of no man's land where anyone can post anything, which can be good because you have the positive side of, you know, migrants can share their unfiltered stories, people can share help, that kind of stuff. But then you also have the other side where those bad actors are able to have a large platform and go viral really quickly. And I think it is there definitely needs to be a little bit more, you know, clarity on what exactly the platform's policies are on this kind of content. But I have seen it be a big problem. A lot of people will reach out to me, you know, sharing their stories of how they were either kidnapped or how they were trafficked or how they were just robbed, different kind of degrees of horrible experiences because they believed in things they saw on social media, which ended up not being true. And I think the platforms do hold some sort of responsibility in these situations for promoting that kind of content, knowing that it is not correct.
Femi, once Manuel was able to make a living in Latin America, he preferred to stay there rather than migrate to America. Do you think that social media can also sell us another type of lie, maybe one which is maybe not a real picture of what awaits migrants in the countries that they're headed to?
Well, just a slight detour, which is relevant, based on what Zoe was saying as well before. He stopped in Latin America, exactly. And there's a lot of people, there's a distinction between some refugees who are able to pay up front for their whole journey and others who kind of have to do this whole leg by leg thing. And traditionally, when you do this leg by leg thing, you kind of pay to get to Libya or you pay to get to Honduras, and then you work for a bit and you pay to get somewhere else. You're actually more likely sometimes to be victim to deceit because of the fact that in terms of the reputation, in terms of kind of the reputation of the smuggler, which is the only thing apart from the price that they can bank on, when you're kind of picking up a second smuggler halfway through your journey, there's less chance of them doing something wrong to you and the news of that getting all the way back home. With social media and with WhatsApp and this kind of stuff, it changes the game slightly, where even if you're doing this whole leg by leg thing, you can still talk to other people. You can still maybe warn them if something goes wrong. Okay, well, don't go to these people or don't go to this area. And so, yes, people can misinform, but it's a way for people to also inform other potential friends and relatives of theirs about bad actors further down the line. But definitely there is, to some degree, people are not going to share the worst aspects. If someone gets to Europe and then they end up on the streets of Greece or the streets of Athens, or they end up in the Calais jungle, maybe they're not going to send home the story, put on their Instagram story how they're struggling. Maybe they're not going to tell their family back home the reality of what they're facing in Fortress Europe, especially as they are trying to maybe even move from one country. If they want to get past Italy or Greece, given the Dublin regulation, where, as I said, you have to claim asylum in the first country you land on, they might be burning off their fingertips so that they don't get ID'd, and they might be evading police and living kind of still underground there. And I do think there's a degree to which people are not going to share the worst aspects of their journey, but there's a degree to which as well we have to remember the conditions that some of these people are fleeing. It's not necessarily pull factors. They're not necessarily people who are being pulled by the idea of riches and wealth in Europe. A lot of these people are moving because of push factors. They're moving because there's war. They're moving because there's inequality in the world, meaning that they come from countries that are impoverished by the global economic system, which extracts wealth from the global south and puts it into the global north. And they're well aware that the global north is where the wealth is where their country's stolen wealth is. And they're well aware that the bombs that are falling on them are going to keep falling tomorrow or the day after. And so there's a lot of people who are not pulled by kind of ideas of wealth and rich and fame in the West, but are pushed away by difficult situations at home.
Well, it isn't only migrants and NGOs using social media in this way today. Governments are also looking to influence the space. Earlier this year, it was revealed that the UK government would pay influencers to post videos to discourage informal migration to the UK. And it's now set to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda even before their cases have been assessed. Let's take a look.
So Britain has just passed one of the most anti-immigrant laws I have ever seen. They are planning to send asylum seekers to Rwanda while their case is still being heard. And just in case you're wondering how far is Rwanda from the UK, they're planning to send people 6,000 miles away while their case is being heard. First of all, people are pointing out that this is cruel and unusual punishment for people who are seeking asylum. It is their right to seek asylum in the UK. But people are also pointing out how much this whole program is actually going to cost.
Zoe, is there a narrative war happening on social media right now? And what does that tell us about the migration debate happening in the real world?
As we all know, what resonates on social media and what people share and respond to and trust is direct interaction between the content creator and the viewer. So that feeling of authenticity is what social media has. So when you're talking about government communications going through social media, they just don't have that sense of trust built up and that sense of authenticity. So now they're going about it in more sort of nefarious ways and trying to create the impression of sort of spontaneous content being created by paying content producers and creators and influencers to relay that message on their behalf. But the numbers are really huge. And when you were talking about social media companies making money off of the videos from different actors in this space and the sort of moral ambiguity there, I think the real money coming into social media companies is coming from government. So we know that in 2022, the government spent over £100,000, the UK government spent over £100,000 on social media targeted advertising. We just heard that another £30,000 has been spent this year. And it's using these deeply invasive forms of digital targeting that are available through these websites. And they're made available to governments. And what's interesting as well is who they're targeting. So they target different groups with different messages. And I think that goes to the sort of information versus misinformation conversation, because they're targeting people in Vietnam and Albania with messages to counteract the messages, because those are countries of origin for people who are being trafficked in the most cases to the UK. So they're being told that they're coming to work in legitimate jobs and that they'll be able to make money in the UK by their traffickers, but then they go into situations of forced labor and exploitation. And that's the difference between trafficking and simply smuggling, which is just bringing somebody across a border without that level of economic exploitation being involved. So there can be a positive if the government is targeting people in those countries with true narratives about what might happen to them and what the trafficking involves.
Thank you to our guests, Zoe, Femi, and Carlos. And thank you all for watching. Did you enjoy the show? Talk to us on social media. And if you have a conversation or a topic that you'd like to flag to us, this is also your show. So we are always open to your suggestions. Use the hashtag or the handle AJStream and we'll look into it. Take care, and I'll see you soon.